It's Mike Newberry again, pastor at First Baptist Church in Lincoln, Arkansas. And so we are involved, as we have been saying, in the march through Matthew chapter 8 and 9. And what I'm calling all of these messages is I'm calling them simply us watching Jesus. We're watching him move, we're watching him act, we're watching him react, we're watching him deal with varied situations and varied people, and we're just noticing it, how good he was at it. And to me, that is what we need to be doing. He is our example, and we need to do our best to follow him. In fact, it says in Romans chapter 8 that it has been predestined that you and I will be conformed to the image of God's Son. Now, you and I shouldn't struggle at that. Why? Because, man, don't you and I want to be as good at it as he was? I mean, I have told you already in these messages that I have watched Jesus, and I have been amazed at just who he was and what he was able to do. And I want to be like that. I want to be like him. Don't you? I want to be like him. In fact, that's what the word Christian means. I'm a Christian. What does that mean? It means I'm like Christ. And I want that. And I'll tell you again why. Why? Because nobody did it better than he did. And so the last time we were here, we saw Jesus come into Peter's house. And then Peter let Jesus see everything he needed to see. He let Jesus put his hands on it. And because of that, then everything got fixed. And then people began to bring their needs to Peter's house. So we let Jesus in, and then Jesus began to flow back out. And so now we're going to look at the scriptures in Matthew chapter 8, beginning at verse 18. And it's going to be a familiar place where Jesus has people come to him and say to him one thing and another. And then Jesus responded to them. So the message is entitled, The Cost of Discipleship. And you're going to get the thought once I begin to read. But let's look at Matthew 8, beginning at verse 18. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart unto the other side. And a certain scribe came and said to him, Master, I will follow you whithersoever thou goest. And Jesus said to him, The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has not where to lay his head. And another of his disciples said to him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their dead. Then I want to take you to Luke chapter 9. Why? Well, have you ever heard the term the synoptic gospels? The word synoptic has the idea of a snapshot, and that's what Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are. All together, they present a snapshot of the entire life and ministry of Jesus. And so a lot of times, one writer will speak about a situation, and then another gospel writer will speak about the same situation, but give you some more details. And so we were introduced to two people here in Matthew chapter 8. Well, when you come to Luke chapter 9, you're going to be introduced to the third person. So Luke 9 is telling us the same story that Matthew 8 did. So listen to Luke 9, verses 61 and 62. And another also said, Lord, I will follow thee, but let me first go bid them farewell, which are at home at my house. And Jesus said to him, No man, having put his hand to the plow And looking back is fit for the kingdom of God. So again, we're looking at the cost of discipleship. Is it good sometimes to think before acting, to mull something over, roll it around, test drive it, so to speak? Obviously, our answer is yes. But is it good sometimes to recognize a good thing and just simply jump on it? If you snooze, you lose. If you hesitate, you could miss that ideal moment. How about that? Well, obviously, again, the answer to that is a yes. But it seems that these two scenes are opposite. And these two sets of advice are contradictory. But how many have learned that life is multivaried and a cookie-cutter approach to everything is just not advisable? We can find stories where both approaches were used, and then each time it produced success. How many get-rich-quick schemes are actually out there? I mean, if it seems too good to be true, yeah, say it with me, it probably is. It is good advice to slow down, stop and think, and just get some advice from your mentors. There are all kinds of stories about people who said yes in the immediate moment, and they met the love of their life, or they caught that break that sent their career then soaring. If you take the approach to life to take things slow, think it over, you may very well miss out on many very good things. If you take the approach to life to act before thinking, be hasty in decisions, then you may very well get hurt. Life is uncertain. This world is uncertain. And so much depends on being in the right place at the right time and knowing the right people. So much depends on the luck of the draw and being lucky. You've got one story where somebody struck it rich, and then you've got another story where somebody bit the dust. So what are we talking about here? We're not talking about the uncertainty of life, but rather we're talking about being a disciple, a follower of Jesus. There is uncertainty in this world, but there is absolute certainty in following Jesus. And we're going to hear both sets of advice in our verses. We're going to hear both consider the cost, think about it, and then don't wait, jump at it. But each one is meant to communicate the very same truth. Do it. I mean, Jesus is going to tell you today there's a cost in being a disciple. And you need to consider that. But in considering it, don't even think he's telling you that you can then make the decision to not do it. No, in both situations, the truth is still the same. Do it. Be a disciple. In the first one, we'll hear Jesus tell him to understand the cost in doing it. In the second one, we'll hear Jesus tell him to understand the cost in not doing it. And so we're going to see in these three individuals, we're going to see the cost of discipleship. We're going to see in the first one, unconditional trust. We're going to see in the second one, undivided affection. And then thirdly, we're going to see in the third one we met in Luke, unrivaled loyalty. And as we've said, the first two, we understand the advice. And then in Luke 9:62, Jesus will speak to the third one. And he will tell him to understand the cost of not finishing once you have started. So let's look. Number one, Matthew 8:18-20, at our first disciple. Jesus says it's a scribe. A scribe that comes and says to Jesus, I want to follow you wherever you go. And then Jesus said, well, every fox has a hole and every bird has a nest, but the Son of Man, to understand clearly what Jesus is saying about the life he lived, Jesus is saying, I don't have any place to live. I have no place to land. Every day of my life is to trust God. I trust God to give me a place to sleep tonight. I trust God to provide for my ability to eat. That was Jesus' life every day. And he told this scribe, stop and think. So what are we to understand? What's the cost in being a disciple? It is unconditional trust. How many find Jesus' approach completely different from what we would think? It almost sounds as if Jesus is discouraging this scribe from doing what it is he says he wants to do. How many of us would have responded to something like this by saying, woohoo, come on, jump in? Here's something I read about what Jesus said. Jesus is not begging for followers in Matthew chapter 8. He's actually turning them away because he warrants unconditional trust and undivided affection from those who follow him. I wonder if there's somebody out there that I'm talking to that you dived in headfirst into Christianity. And only now that you're this far into it are you understanding the cost of being a disciple. Are you understanding the level of trust it takes in all of life's uncertainties, the level of trust it takes to live by faith? Some writers suggested that this scribe had been in the audience during Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And the scribe, hearing Jesus speak, he then got all kinds of excited. What he had heard of Jesus was true. He had heard others say about Jesus, no man speaks like he does. He speaks as one who has authority, not like the scribes and the Pharisees. And you have to wonder, how many times had this scribe experienced the complete lack of power and authority in his sermons and his speeches? How many times had this scribe been the one doing the talk and then noticed people yawning and people's attention being drawn away by everything that was around them, and he recognized his complete lack of power, his complete lack of authority? And hearing Jesus and then comparing himself, he wanted to experience the power Jesus possessed. He felt the tug on his heart to become a follower of Jesus. But he, down deep in his gut, he knew there was a hesitancy due to the position that he held as a scribe. Because he also knew what all of his superiors, what their opinion was about Jesus. So he wants to follow, but he doesn't want to lose his place. He doesn't want to lose his position. And during this period of indecision, he sees that Jesus and his disciples are preparing to leave. Listen to it again. Matthew chapter 8. Listen to how this story presents itself. Now, when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave commandment to depart. Who's in this great company? Who's in these great multitudes? It was this scribe. And he notices that Jesus and his disciples are about to leave. And in this moment, he begins to say to himself, he's leaving. If you're going to do this, do it now. It's now or never. And in his excitement, during his emotional high, this scribe runs to Jesus, and in that excitement says what we hear him saying, Master, I want to follow you wherever you go. Is it possible to make a decision not based on real commitment, but rather an emotional high, and then later on fall away from that decision? And again, there's somebody out there that you know what I'm talking about. Why? Because I'm talking about you. You used to be more than what you are now. You used to be this scribe saying to Jesus, I'll follow you wherever you go. But that's not you anymore. That's not you anymore. Why is it? Well, listen to Matthew chapter 13. A couple of places. First of all, verses 5 and 6. Some fell upon stony places, talking about the sower and the seed. Some fell upon stony places where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And then you and I know that in the parable of seed and the sower, Jesus explained all of this. So we jump ahead to verses 20 and 21 as Jesus explains. But he that received the seed into stony places, the same as he that hears the word, and anon with joy received it. Was that you? That you made a decision? And it was a decision not based on commitment, but just an emotional rush. Then he said this, yet has he not root in himself, but endures for a while, and when tribulation or persecution rises because of the word, by and by he is offended. Nobody can say that Jesus lied to them. Nobody can say that Jesus promised them health, wealth, and the world, and then later failed to deliver. Jesus says to all of us, upon our decision to follow him, he says, I'd love to have you, but this decision will cost you. There is a cost in being his disciple. And there's somebody out there that you have made this decision, you are his disciple, and you are paying the cost, and you understand full well what Jesus said. He's not playing games with you. You and I have all gone through gut-wrenching experiences in staying true to Jesus. What did Jesus teach us about the cost in finding life? In fact, I read once that it is the one statement that Jesus makes the most times throughout the gospel record. And it's this, where Jesus described this. He said, if you want to find life, then he said the cost is to lose life. And to lose it for the gospel's sake. Why is it that you and I are willing to pay that price? And what did he mean by that? Well, he's talking about a worldly sense of gaining life. If you and I were to talk to anybody that was not a disciple of Jesus, they would tell us Christians that we're missing out on life. We're missing the party. And so we need to understand, what did Jesus mean by life? You want to know what I've learned about loving Jesus and paying the cost and being a disciple? I have found the peace that passes understanding. I like to tell the church, I like the way peace feels. I like having peace in my mind. I like having peace in my heart. I like having peace with others that I care about. I like that. And then Jesus spoke about a joy unspeakable and full of glory. He said, the joy of the Lord is your strength. And who out there do you understand exactly what he's talking about? Why? Because you possess it. It's yours. And you like it, and you want it to stay. You want it to remain. That's what he meant by life. But what do you got to do to find it? You've got to give up. You've got to give away your life. Give it away to what? Give it away to who? Give it away to Jesus. He says in those places, give it away for the gospel's sake. The Apostle Paul said this, I die every day. What did he mean by that? He meant that he died to his own fleshly appetites and desires. And he wanted to die to himself and then let Jesus live his life through him and in him. That's what he meant. Do you want to find life? Then you got to be willing to give it up. Why are we willing to pay that cost? Why? It's because of what we get in return. Here's something I read. Following Christ may mean losing everything in this world. This is another problem with the prosperity gospel. It makes Jesus a means to an end. You come to Jesus to get health, wealth, or anything else you want. Just fill in the blank. The problem is that you shouldn't come to Jesus to get stuff. You come to Jesus to get Jesus. You may lose everything in this world, but he is enough. Haven't we found that to be oh so true? If you got Jesus, then you got enough. Let me turn over to the first chapter of Peter's epistle. 1 Peter chapter 1 and verse 7. He says that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perishes, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. He's talking about the process metal goes through to become pure. And here he's referring to gold, and he ties that into our faith becoming pure. And then the end of the verse says that you and I are going to want that to have happened when he finally appears and he finally comes and we stand in front of him. He says again at the end of this verse that we will be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. We're going to want to have pure faith. But what is that going to take? It's going to take our faith going through the furnace. Going through the furnace and becoming pure. And that's what he meant here in this advice he gives to this scribe. You need to hang on a second. You need to press the brakes, and you need to understand what is going to be required to follow me everywhere I go. It's going to take unconditional trust. You're going to have to be willing to take his hand and let him walk you through valleys, trials, problems, sickness, and whatever else. But not ever let go of that hand and have unconditional trust. The purification of faith requires the fire of a furnace. We understand that the fire takes, that the fire removes. And even though you and I are told that what is taken is the dross or the impurity, and it's pure gold that is produced, it is still difficult sometimes and even painful. But we go through it We endure it because you and I have unconditional trust of our Creator. Again, in Peter's epistle, in chapter 4, he talked a lot about enduring trials, enduring the fire. And he says in the 4th chapter of the first epistle of Peter, he says this in verse 19, "Wherefore let them that suffer according to the will of God commit the keeping of their souls to him in well-doing, as unto a faithful Creator." Unconditional trust. Now let's look at the second person we're introduced to. This is verses 21 and 22. Again, it says, "Another of his disciples said to him, Lord, suffer me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Follow me, and let the dead bury the dead." So not only do we have unconditional trust, but we have to have undivided affection. We have the opposite with this second person. This second one said to Jesus that he would follow him, but I can't do it right now. He said that he would follow him, but he needed to do something first. Hearing what this second person said, it sounds like something pretty important that he said he needed to do first. Can I give you an imaginatory way this conversation might have taken place? The man, Jesus, I want to follow you, but I have to go to my father's funeral first. Jesus, no, forget the funeral. Come right now, or don't come at all. I want to read you something I read out of a commentary that I hope will give some understanding to what Jesus is saying and what this disciple was actually saying. This writer said, "The true explanation undoubtedly lies in the way in which the Jews used this phrase, 'I must bury my father,' and in the way in which it is still used in the East. An incident related by a Syrian missionary. This missionary was friendly with an intelligent and rich young Turk. He advised him to make a tour of Europe at the close of his education so that his education would be completed and his mind broadened. The Turk answered, 'I must first of all bury my father.' The missionary expressed his sympathy and sorrow that the young man's father had died. But the young Turk explained that his father was still very much alive, and that what he meant was that he must fulfill all his duties to his parents and to his relatives before he could leave them to go on the suggested tour, that, in fact, he could not leave home until after his father's death, which might not happen for many years. That is undoubtedly what the man in this gospel incident meant. He meant, I will follow you someday when my father is dead and when I am free to go. He was, in fact, putting off his following of Jesus for many years to come. For the most part, being a Christian means that we have to become responsible, that we keep our promises, that you and I fulfill all of our obligations. So we need to understand this phrase, we need to understand this disciple, and we need to understand what Jesus then said to this disciple. Jesus is not suggesting that you and I not fulfill our obligations. Jesus is not suggesting that you and I do not keep our promises. Let me turn over to the book of Acts chapter 4 and begin reading at verse 17 for some further enlightenment. it said, "But that it spread no further among the people, let us straitly threaten them, that they speak henceforth to no man in his name. And they called them and commanded them not to speak at all, nor teach in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered and said to them, Whether it be right in the sight of God to hearken unto you more than unto God, judge you. For we cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard." So how do I use those verses to give me some understanding and some clarity about what we're looking at here today? Let me explain two possible situations a believer might be in. First of all, this: you are blessed when you are surrounded by people who support your Christian walk. We are blessed when we have people who, after we make a commitment to follow Jesus, to put him first, that those people applaud that decision. But then you need to understand that there are a host of other people who, that when they say yes to Jesus, they are having to say no to a lot of other people. There are some cultures that when a family member decides to follow Jesus, the family has a funeral for that individual. That's why Jesus said that to follow him may mean that we have to hate our own mother, father, brother, or sister. What that means is that when it comes between a decision for them or Jesus, it's Jesus every time. And the result is that the family feels betrayed. We love our families. We love our friends. But we love Jesus even more. The cost in being a disciple, it is unconditional trust. It is undivided affection. And now, as we remind ourselves of the third person we met in the Gospel of Luke, it is unrivaled loyalty. Let me turn back over to Luke chapter 9 and refresh your memory of this third person that we met. "And another said, Lord, I will follow you, but let me first go bid them farewell, which are at home at my house. And Jesus said to him, No man having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of God." We have the third cost to being a disciple, and that is unrivaled loyalty. Is it true that in the moment we decided to follow Jesus, in that moment we did not know what later we would have to give up? Jesus told us that to be his disciple meant that we would have to deny ourselves. Now that we have some time built up in the Christian life, now that we have some miles behind us, we more fully understand what he meant. Even though we might understand, what do we still need to accept? Well, it's not over yet, and I've got more miles behind me, but I've got more miles ahead of me too. And in the miles ahead, they may still include sacrifices. Again, I was reading and studying, and this is what I found this writer said about our verses. Jesus did not want followers who were swept away by a moment of emotion, which quickly blazed and just as quickly died. He did not want men who were carried away by a tide of mere feeling, which quickly flowed and just as quickly ebbed. He wanted men who knew what they were doing. He talked about taking up a cross. He talked about setting himself above the dearest relationships in life. He talked about giving away everything to the poor. He was always saying to men, yes, I know that your heart is running out to me, but do you love me enough for that? In any sphere of life, men must be confronted with the facts. If a young man expresses a desire for scholarship, we must say to him, good, but are you prepared to scorn delights and live laborious days? When an explorer is building up his team, he will be inundated with people offering their services. But he must weed out the romantics and the realists by saying, good, but are you prepared for the snow and the ice, or the swamps and the heat, for the exhaustion and the weariness of it all? When a young person wishes to become an athlete, the trainer must say, good, but are you prepared for the self-denial, the self-discipline that alone will win you the eminence of which you dream? This is not to discourage enthusiasm, but it is to say that enthusiasm, which has not faced the facts, will soon be dead ashes instead of a flame. No man could ever say that he followed Jesus on false pretenses. Jesus was uncompromisingly honest. We do Jesus a grave disservice if ever we lead people to believe that the Christian way is an easy way. There is no thrill like the way of Christ. There is no glory like the end of that way. But Jesus Christ never said it was an easy way. The way to glory always involved a cross. And for somebody out there, you've gotten far enough now into the Christian life that you understand even more what he was saying. What is it going to take? What's the cost in being a disciple? It's going to take absolute trust. It's going to take undivided affection. I love Jesus more than I love anything or anybody. And you need to understand that if you're blessed and all of the dearest people in your life support your Christian walk, then you can love Jesus and love them at the same time, and there's no conflict. But for somebody, you understand what he meant, that loving Jesus has cost you some relationships, some misunderstanding from other people. And you're still trying to add that, all of that baggage into your Christian life. And it's not easy. And then we understand that it takes undivided loyalty. So there's a cost. Why do we pay the cost? Well, it's like I said, I pay the cost. Why? Because of what I'm getting from it. Isn't it true? I love Jesus. I'm getting more from him than he's getting from me. And I want more of only what he can give me. And I understand that might mean that he's going to need to get more of me. So there's a cost. Let's just pay it. God bless you. I love you. See you next time. Bye.